Hi, this is Daniel Allen. So I'm going to be doing my assignment 14 presentation on human immunity. So this assignment we're going to be covering three different sections. So first we've got section 1. This is non-specific defences against disease and describing the first and second lines of defence. Second section will be covering specific immunity, and the third section will be covering the biology of vaccination. Okay. So firstly, the first line of defence in section 1. This is non-specific defence systems. So these are physical and chemical barriers that prevent entry of a pathogen. Okay, so firstly, you have the structure of the skin. This is called the integumentary system, if I'm saying that correctly. It forms a waterproof barrier which replaces itself every 28 days. It impedes penetration of microbial organisms, chemical irritants, solar radiation, and inhibits water loss. Okay. Then moving on, we have mucous membranes, which cover the primary interfaces between the external environment and yourself, obviously. So this includes things like your mouth and your eyes. And the mucus is coated secretions to fight microorganisms like the eyes. Tears contain lysosome that attacks bacteria. Then we have the gastrointestinal system. This includes stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes, bile, intestinal secretions. Okay, it has acidic and alkali secretions to protect from bacteria and microorganisms. Okay, moving on. We also have the nasal cavity and airways. The walls of the nose are coated with mucus, which is then removed through blowing your nose, obviously, when you blow your nose, and also through coughing. Also, cilia is the line that stops particles from reaching the lungs. Then last we have the urinary tract. So the frequent movement of the urine washes out the pathogens, but in females obviously the urinary tract is a lot shorter. This can sometimes lead to infection. Okay, so the second line of defense would the first thing that will happen in the second line of defense will be inflammation. So this increases blood flow around the affected area, meaning that it's a faster response from the immune system. Okay, obviously it's going to look a little bit red in that area, and it'll be slightly higher temperature because obviously there's a lot of activity in that area. So the white blood cells will then go to attack that area. One of the main processes that these, like, I don't know, foreign bodies that will go through is called phagocytosis. This is an engulfing and destroying of damaged, defective, or invasive cells. Two of the main forms of second line defense are macrophages, firstly. These are formed in response to an infection or an accumulation of damaged cells / dead cells. They essentially engulf and destroy the targeted cell. So neutrophils, which are the most prominent and most abundant white blood cell in the body, also along with engulfing and destroying the cells, they also release where is it? So they release cytokines, which attracts more immune cells to the affected site, which increases the immune response by the body and makes everything a little bit faster, essentially. Okay, so section 2 is all about specific immunity. The first thing that we need to cover is acquired immunity. So this is essentially immunity that is not present at birth, but is learned as you are exposed to your natural environment. Okay. So when your body encounters a foreign antigen, your immune system will tailor its response to that specific antigen. Okay. So there's two different forms of acquired immunity, active and passive. So active is when your body is exposed to a small amount of like a non-lethal vaccine. This allows your body to essentially learn that specific, learn about that specific antigen and how to combat it in the future. So if you ever come across a lethal dose in the future, you're not going to be essentially harmed by it because your body knows exactly how to deal with it. And passive is through introducing preformed antibodies into the body. So instead of allowing your body to create an immune response to it, we actively introduce the antibodies into the body ourselves instead of through the body. Okay. The next section we're going to talk about is immune system cells, or white blood cells, essentially. So you have neutrophils. These are the most common types of white blood cells. The role is to stop germs from entering the body through like cuts and stuff. The second, we have lymphocytes. These produce antibodies usually present in the lymphatic tissue. Also, they make memory cells that can remember any previous pathogens. Then we have monocytes. They are unwanted cells that digest large particles in a wound. I haven't said this correctly. It's eosinophils or phials. They have to kill pathogens, mainly parasites and worms, and basophils. They secrete anticoagulants and antibodies. It helps to dilate the blood vessels, which will allow the immune cells to react to the affected area at a faster rate, essentially. Okay. Next section, we're going to be talking about immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins, sorry. Essentially, they are antibodies, which are proteins attached to antigens. Their main purposes are to target an infection, recruitment of immune cells, neutralization of toxins, removal of antigens, complement activation, stimulation of cells that can eat foreign substances, and the activation of most cells. Okay, so essentially their structure, so the structure in like a Y shape, there's like 5 different types. The thicker side, so the part with the orange bits, that attaches on to, that specific, where are we? So onto the antigen, and the other side attaches to the immune cells to allow for a response. So this is the way they attach, essentially. Okay, and these are the different structures, and they all affect different types of antigens. Okay, so self-recognition. This in short is essentially your body distinguishing between internal cells and external foreign cells, essentially, so foreign material. This is done through mechanisms of antigens, as they are cell-specific. So if the antigen isn't recognised, then it's a non-self material, and the body will try to, expel that from the body. Okay. 2 of the most important factors are the major histocompatibility complexes. This is essentially how the body recognises the difference between a foreign and domestic part of the body, essentially. Okay, so MGC1, located in all nucleated cells, they act as an early warning for the immune system by displaying foreign proteins on the surface of the cell, allowing it to be distinguished as non-self. And then MGC2, much like the first one, but instead of displaying antigen from extracellular pathogens instead. Okay, so self-tolerance. The immune system produces 10 to the 7 different types of cells. I'm pretty sure something like 100 million different types of cells when they are created in the body. It calls off the cells which are self, essentially. If removed off the self-reacting cell type fails, then the self-antigens will be attacked by B or T cells. They're the 2 main types of cells which attack non-self cells. These can be defined as an autoimmune disease. So what is... Okay, so we have rejected transplants organ... Sorry, I'm losing my words here. Rejection of transplanted organs. This all comes down to the immune system. As a new organ will be a foreign body, because obviously it's not part of the body when it is put in, the immune system combats foreign agents. So when antigens from the foreign cells are recognised to be non-self, then essentially the organ will be rejected from the body and it will not function. For this not to happen, the transplant must be matched closely. This is done using tissue typing and monoclonal antibodies. There's 3 types: hyperacute, acute, and chronic. Yes, this essentially allows the body to allows doctors and whoever's putting the organs into the body to essentially make it seem like trick the immune response into thinking it's a part of the body and it's meant to be there. It's essentially, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Okay, so an autoimmune disease is essentially when your body is attacking healthy cells in your body, so it mistakenly attacks different parts. But obviously, as there's 10 to the 7 different types of cells in the body, there's many different ways in which this can affect the body. So I'm going to go over 2 examples here. Okay, so the first one is rheumatoid arthritis, if I'm saying that correctly. This disease can affect the joint in the body, causing pain, swelling, and stiffness. So what's happened is your immune system is attacking the cells that line your joints instead of the non-self cells and tissue. So essentially it makes it harder to move your joints essentially. Okay. Then secondly, we have MS, or multiple sclerosis. This is where the immune system mistakenly attacks the brain and the spinal cord of the nervous system. As it's affecting such a crucial part of the body, it can have many symptoms. It can cause fatigue, difficulty working, blurred vision, problems controlling the bladder, numbness around the body, muscle stiffness, spasms, problem with balance and coordination, and also with the thinning of the thinking, learning, and planning. As of right now, as we don't know what causes the immune disease, there's currently no cure. But the ways in which we can be limited through living a healthy lifestyle, essentially. Okay, so now we move on to section 3. Section 3 is all about immunity. So the first thing that we're going to be discussing is active immunity. So obviously I have covered it briefly earlier in the presentation. To put simply, active immunity is resistance to disease or illness from creating antibodies to combat an antigen. Immunity can be split up into 2 sections, so natural or artificial immunity. Okay, so we have natural active immunity. Natural immunity is built up naturally, obviously, as you can imagine, without outside intervention. The B cells in your bloodstream will remember the pathogen that you have encountered previously in your natural environment before, and if the pathogen reappears, then your body will essentially be accustomed to dealing with it, and the pathogen will be destroyed, essentially rendering you immune to that pathogen anytime in the future. Best example of this would be measles, for example. When you get measles when you're younger, you only really get it once, and then you don't get it again, ever again. So that's a good example of how natural immunity works. Okay, then we have artificial active immunity. This is where a person would be subjected to a vaccine or a weak or harmless version of a pathogen, and then which would allow your body to essentially create antibodies and remember the specific antibodies needed in the future, so that potentially more harmful version, if you ever come into contact with it in your natural environment, you'll be equipped to deal with it, essentially. Then we have passive immunity. Just like active immunity, passive immunity can be broken up into 2. So you have natural passive immunity. This is where antibodies are passed down maternally through the bloodstream in pregnancy. They can also be passed on through mother's milk to children between the ages of 4 to 6 weeks, which is usually good for them. You have artificial passive immunity. This is through the injection or transfusion made by another person. It only lasts a few weeks and isn't reproduced in the body naturally, so it will dissipate and disappear eventually. Okay, and then we've got vaccinations. This is probably one of the more important bits. So this involves exposing the body's immune system to weak or harmless versions of the pathogen, so that the white blood cells will attempt to get rid of it, just like any other pathogen. This process can then be replicated in the future through the process known as immunological memory. This is how the body remembers what specific, immune response stops a specific pathogen or antigen. Okay, so we can move on now. Okay, so a good example of a vaccine that shown to have worked would be the measles vaccine. So the measles back in the 1960s was quite prevalent. There was around 20 million cases. And actually there was quite a lot of cases. But from the measles being initially introduced, it's been estimated that it's thwarted over 20 million measles cases and included and stopped over 4,500 people's deaths. So the data records taken from the Public Health England between 1940 and 2016 shows that the numbers of measles cases and deaths have recorded reduced dramatically over the years, as you can see here in my table. So we had over 400,000 cases in 1945. Then by 2005, it's gone down to 2,000, which is basically nothing when compared to 400,000. Okay, then we've got herd immunity. Herd immunity, the best way to describe it is how if you have people in your area that can't get vaccinated for whatever reason, maybe that they're too weak, they're too old, they're too young, so they'll also be susceptible to that pathogen in that area. But if the large proportion of the population have had that virus, then they won't be able to essentially be, be harmed by it, because it's essentially a block. Because for them to get that pathogen off another person who's also like susceptible to it, they'd have to get through like many people like in contact that have essentially built up immunity to the pathogen because of the vaccine that they've taken. So they won't be able to get harmed by it. So it's good for like older people and like younger people, or anyone that's a bit too weak won't be able to take just even a small amount of the vaccine, because that'll make them too ill. Okay, so we've got vaccination programs. So as it's been shown, it's important that as many people as possible are vaccinated to stop the spread of pathogens. For this to happen, the vaccines are available at local clinics. Therefore, there are also NHS programs to vaccinate the disabled or immunocompromised people. If they cannot make it to the local clinic, then it can be done by health visitors. There's obviously factors that can delay the uptake of vaccines. So there was a vaccine study that in 1998, the MMR vaccine actually was linked to autism. There's no actual scientific proof that this was ever true, but it did slow down the people's perspectives on vaccines, and it did slow down essentially the handing out of this vaccine, which obviously isn't good. Okay, yes, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening.